Unit 3, Grade 7, Fractions, Decimals, and Percents. First of all, we got to know what a percent actually means. And percent is very simple. Percent means per 100 or out of 100. And if we were to write out of 100, we could write it like this as a fraction. 1 out of 100 will equal 1 percent. There you go. Now if we were to write the next one, and I could make up a number 12 out of 100, that would be 12%. And then you pick a number out of 100, it could be 99 out of 100, good math test score, would give you 99%. Okay? So you can write your out of 100 is easy to change to a percent because basically all you do is drop the fraction part and put a percent at the end of it. If we look at some of these, this is a hundredths grid. So if I were to shade in 1, it would be 1 out of 100 or 1%. If I were to shade in 2, it would be 2%. If I were to shade in a whole whack of it, all I have to do is count how many I have shaded in. In this case, it is 2 full rows or 20%. Which, funny enough, is 2 out of 10. 2 full rows out of 10 is 20%. And we'll get into that a little bit later. Over on this side, if I were to break up my lovely looking hundredths grid, and I shade in a quarter of it, or 1/4 of it, okay, that would be 25 black shaded, or 25%. Okay, so 25 out of 100. So just count up how many blacks you got, and then write that out of 100. All right, so the first step, changing a fraction to a decimal. The easiest way to change a fraction to a decimal is to make it have a bottom of 10, 100, or 1,000. In other words, if we could make this number become 10, 100, or 1,000, it would be real easy. Because as we learned before, if we could make it out of 10, it's 1 decimal place. If we could make it out of 100, it is 2 decimal places. Or if we can make it out of 1,000, it is 3 decimal places. So looking at this one here, 1/4. What can I do to make that become a 10, 100, or 1,000? Can I multiply anything to give me 10? Well, 1 times 4 is 4, 2 times 4 is 8, 3 times 4 is 12. It's not going to work very good. However, I could multiply this by 25 to make it 100. And that would make it 100 on the bottom. But whatever I do to the bottom part of my fraction, I must do to the top to make sure it's still equivalent. So now this is 25 out of 100, which is 25%. So sometimes it's easy to make it out of 10, and then sometimes it's easy to make it out of 100, or sometimes out of 1,000. And so it's pretty easy to multiply it by something in this case. If I were given maybe 1 out of, 11, that's going to be real hard to make this bottom number become 10, 100, or 1,000. Okay, so you'll have to do it a different way. But some numbers will go into 10, 100, or 1,000 real nice and easy. For example, if it was out of 50, all you'd have to do is double it. If it was out of, 40, that will work because you can times this by, I could make it 100. No, but I certainly could keep going until I make it pretty close to 1,000. Or I could just divide it by 4. Sometimes that works out nicely. For example, this one here. I could divide the bottom by 4 and get 10. I could divide the top by 4 and get 1. And then that is real easy to change to a percent. But more of that to come a little bit later. The second method to do it is to change it to a decimal. So we've got to divide it. Because remember, all a decimal really means, all a decimal really means is this is out of 10, if it only has this much 0.1 is 1 out of 10. But in this case, this is out of 100 if it has two places, because this is the hundredths place. So this written as a fraction would be 12 out of 100, or 12 hundredths, because there's no whole numbers. So that's really easy to change this now to a percent. That is 12%. But that's not what we have here. Okay? So let's get rid of that. We've got this guy here. We already know this is 25%. We already know that. But just for argument's sake, let's go 1 and let's divide it by 4. So here's our 4. Now we know 4 is not going to go into 1, so I'm going to put a decimal and add maybe a couple zeros. I might not use them all, but we'll see. So I'm going to put my decimal up here. Okay. Will 4 go into 1? 0 times, so we don't have to do that. Will 4 go into 10? Because we ignore the decimal. 4 goes into 10 2 times, so 2 times 4 is 8. Remember, we're ignoring this decimal. We've already got it up here. 10 take away 8 is 2. Bring down some help, because you know 4 is not going to go into 2. So 4 goes into 20 5 times, and 5 times 4 is 20, and we've got none left over. We've got 0 remainder. So our answer is 0.25. And since it's 1 2 decimal places, and this is the hundredths place, we know it's going to be out of 100. So it's going to be 25 out of 100. And as we just learned, anything written out of 100 really means percent. So it's going to be 25%. So you can do that with any fraction. You can divide it. 1 divided by 4, 10 divided by 50. It doesn't matter what the fraction is. Sometimes you just have to divide it when you can't make it equal to 10, 100, or 1,000. Now, there's two types of decimals. There's a terminating decimal or a repeating decimal. A terminating decimal, like 1 divided by 4, as we just found out was 0.25, it ends. There's no more to do. There's no remainder. It's not going on and on. But there are some other decimals that if you went 25 divided by 99, you're going to keep getting 0.25252525, and it keeps going and going and going. So you would write that 0.25, and it seems like this is the core that's repeating, the 25. So I would write that with a bar across the top, which means this keeps repeating over and over. So this is a repeating decimal. It does not end.